Baldur's Gate 3 has been taking the world by storm since it first launched, proving itself to be a worthy successor to the Baldur's Gate franchise, where you had the first and second games winning so many awards around the table for Best Game of the Year and the companion systems and the mechanics, and like the first time so many people had ever seen like Dungeons and Dragons laid out in a digital format before, and sort of kickstarting that initial round of CRPGs or computer role-playing games, which have since followed. Icewind Dale, Neverwinter Nights, things like Knights of the Old Republic even, and then going on to see things like Wastelanders and Fallout, and obviously Fallout, around the same time, but still, you know what I mean? Like we've seen a huge rush of CRPGs in the wake of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, and here we are with Baldur's Gate 3. And I think one of the most interesting things about this game, and it's one of the things that I know there is a lot of discussion about this topic in recent years, which is the monetization model of a game. And Baldur's Gate 3 has gone very old school in this regards, in the sense that you pay for the title, you get the title, you play the whole title, there's nothing else included, there's no microtransactions, there's no DLCs, there's no always online component necessary. It's just a game that you can log into and play with your friends. Single player, multiplayer, you decide, you get to choose your party and then venture forth. And I know a lot of people like to poke the stick at that sleeping bear of, what's a good or bad way to monetize. And everybody's got opinions on what's, a good way or a bad way. But the reality, at least from an industry standpoint, is that it largely doesn't matter how you monetize your game, because if people like it, they will play it, no matter what the monetization model is. It doesn't matter if you've got microtransactions or no microtransactions. People will play. There's a small vocal minority of people who will rant and rave about microtransactions and how they're predatory and evil and all these other things. But the reality is it really doesn't matter. People play the games that they want to play regardless. A good example of this is Diablo 4. I love Diablo 4. I thought it was a great game. I bought it, played it, had a lot of fun in it. I'm still playing it on a once-a-week basis with Gila, doing the seasonal characters. And I played my initial rogue all the way through the campaign. I worked a sorcerer up through, and now I'm playing on a druid for the seasonal stuff. And one of the things a lot of people will point out about this game compared to Diablo 4 is that game also had a single player and a multiplayer component, and yet they force people to always be online, and they have transactions to boot. Microtransactions to boot. And a lot of people have said that's predatory of Blizzard. They shouldn't do that. It should only be buy the base game, play the base game, and don't worry about anything else. And you could totally play it that way. I have not spent a dime on Baldur's Gate. I need more coffee, everybody. I have not spent a dime on Diablo 4, just like I haven't spent a dime on Baldur's Gate 3 beyond the initial purchase price. Well, how is that? Because I see a lot of people out there say that you can't play Diablo 4 without purchasing a battle pass or without microtransactions. You can't play the game. There's content locked behind a paywall. No, there's not. There is zero content locked behind a paywall in Diablo 4. The base content of the game is there for everyone to explore for the purchase price. You can play it. You can play all the content of the game. You can play all the multiplayer content of the game. You can play all of the seasonal content of the game without ever purchasing any of the additional stuff that's out there, whether it's the Battle Pass subscription or the cosmetic microtransactions or any of the other things that are optional features for you to partake in. And I think this is a very important conversation to have, because I know a lot of people like to paint the picture that Larian Studios has created this perfect game with Baldur's Gate 3, and it is very, very, very good. Easily my game of the year, potentially game of the decade. We still have to wait for Starfield and, Star Wars Outlaws and, all these other games that are coming out next year. Avowed, But that being said, this is a very different way to do things when you compare to the modern state of gaming. Doing a game where there's no microtransactions, no store, and everything else, can you still be profitable as a company and launch a game this way? And I would argue that you can, but You have to also understand where Larian Studios is coming from. They are a smaller company, starting off with 120-ish team members before they started developing Baldur's Gate 3, and needing 400-ish people over the course of development. Who knows if they're going to scale back now that they're done, or if they're going to keep the same size and work on something bigger and better for the next Divinity game. Are they going to work on a new Baldur's Gate 3 DLC? We don't know. But making a game with no microtransactions in an era when we know that microtransactions work, and we know that it doesn't matter how you monetize a game, people who love the game will play it and pay for it however you monetize it, if they enjoy the game. It is a risk on their part because you are essentially throwing away free money by not having microtransactions in the game. Cosmetics in particular, cosmetic potions, things of that nature, because there will always be people who want to buy those things. It doesn't matter the vocal minority. The vocal minority who cry about how microtransactions ruin games and I'm never going to support these evil, greedy corporations. Well, these evil, greedy corporations that a lot of people like to complain about also make really good games. Like EA, as an example, they publish hundreds, if not thousands, of games every single year. Not all of them are great games. Some of them are mediocre games. Some of them are bad games, but some of them are really good games. I would point to, Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order as examples of good games that EA has published which do not have microtransactions in them. So you can't claim that EA is an evil, greedy corporation that always puts out predatory games, because that's just not true. You don't know what you're talking about when you say that. You are having a reactionary comment. But there is something to be said about microtransactions and a company choosing not to have them in their game. I think it's a bold statement because it is a statement that says, we're going to try this. We're going to see, can we make enough money as a company to pay our 400 employees, to still scale the company up and become bigger and better at what we do, and make games that fit all the different styles of people who want to play a game without having microtransactions and a cash up and everything else. Because one of the downsides to that is you have to then have a stable of artists who are creating nothing but that consumable content for the people who want the microtransactions. Diablo 4 being a good example. The Battle Pass, which is great, you don't have to pay for it. There are two versions of the Battle Pass with D4, where one version is where everybody gets access to it and you can play through it at your leisure. You never have to pay for it. You get occasional rewards out of that pool of rewards, or if you want to pay the $10 or whatever it is for that Game Pass, you then get all of the rewards, all of which are cosmetic and don't impact your character whatsoever, and none of it is tied to content. So when you look at the difference between these two games, say Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3, one has just, content, multiplayer, single player, can be played offline, and has no microtransactions. Baldur's Gate 3. And then the other one is single player, multiplayer, has microtransactions, needs to be online, but you can still play all of the content of the game without needing to pay for anything extra. That's the big thing. People will say that cosmetics are content. That is not true. Cosmetics is not content. Story is content. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, that is the content of the game. Cosmetic items are fluff. It's never been content. I know some people out there have very strong opinions about this, but sometimes opinion is not fact. And the fact is, content is story, it's progression, it's the adventure of the characters from point A to point B. And when you look at what Larian Studios has produced with Baldur's Gate 3, it is an amazing game with a rich, deep story that doesn't have any cosmetic microtransactions associated with it. What's up, everybody? Quick commercial break here to give it a shout out to our guild champions, who are the highest tier memberships here on YouTube. Ancient Entity, Assassin Gamer 94, Bubbleonia Rising, Crazy's Relative, Mujin, and Remedy. Thanks so much for the highest tier membership. And thanks to all of the members who support the channel, because you keep me doing this full time. You too can become a supporter if you're new here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Join as a member. There's 3 different tiers. We do lots of special stuff, private polls, private videos. You get a shout out if you're the highest tier membership, but you can also do one-off donations in the form of super chats on any live stream or premiere you see, and of course super thanks on any upload or YouTube short. Whatever you can contribute, it's great. Keeps me on the air full time, keeps the cats fed, keeps the homestead running. Anyway, back to the video, everybody. Associated with it. Is that going to shoot them in the foot in the long run? I don't know. I really don't. I can't predict that. But I do know that they have produced something that is taking the Steam charts by storm and is, as of yesterday, I know it was balancing between number one and number two slot in the most pre-orders on the PS5 with Madden, which is pretty impressive to think about. Um, but at the end of the day, Blizzard, as an example, is a company with thousands of employees, and as a result, also they have shareholders. But it's a different beast of an entity, and therefore it requires a different type of monetization to generate the types of revenue required to keep thousands of employees employed. And yes, there is absolutely the evil devil of shareholders and a CEO who's making tens of millions of dollars, and that's an issue related to the United States and capitalism and things of that nature. Whereas Larian Studios is not a U.S. corporation. Larian Studios is a company headquartered in a completely different country in the European Union with completely different rules and regulations and a completely different pay structure and pay scale and all of these other things. So it's really hard to make a comparison between the two without understanding all of the nuances behind why certain games have microtransactions and others don't. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as long as all of the content is available for the players to play for that base price. And it is with most games. Matter of fact, I am hard-pressed to think of a single game that locks content behind a paywall, with the exception of things like MMORPGs, like, say, Lord of the Rings Online is a good example of this, where here's a game, here's content. If you pay a monthly subscription, you get access to all of the content. If you choose the free-to-play option, you get access to this content. And if you want more, you pay a microtransaction for this quest pack, that quest pack, that quest pack, and beyond. And that allows them to have different tiers of monetization to keep the game going. And for fans of Middle-earth, no one should be complaining if they want to play a game that is Middle-earth, because it's their form of monetization which allows them to keep the game running. And that's an important thing for people who want to play a Middle-earth game, because if it didn't exist, you wouldn't be able to play it. So I realize that microtransactions aren't favored by many people. I particularly am a huge fan of the fact that Larian Studios has produced something that is old school in the sense that it's just a game that you can play. That's cool. But I also love having my cosmetic microtransaction options available. Anyone who's ever watched me play or stream Star Wars: The Old Republic or Lord of the Rings Online knows that I have spent a lot of money on cosmetics on top of a subscription. I have no problem supporting the companies that create good games that I enjoy. So it's important to have this conversation about microtransactions, because I know some people have used these crazy Reddit threads as examples of, like, game developers are terrified of what Larian Studios is doing. No, they're not. They are not terrified of what Larian Studios is doing. Companies are going to monetize their games however they want to monetize them, because they're going to look for the best ways to scale their company, pay their employees, and yes, if possible, make a profit for the people in charge. And that's just the world we live in. Railing against that structure doesn't do any good. Playing the games that we enjoy and ignoring the games that we don't enjoy, that's the easiest way to bring about change in your own local environment. So it's that simple. If you like good games, play good games. Doesn't matter who publishes them, doesn't matter how they're monetized. If it's a good game, you should go out there and play it and support the developers who made those games. Obviously, there is always going to be the big bad corporation behind the scenes. We have no idea who are the big bad guys sometimes, because they might be masked in sheep's clothing. You never know. I'm not saying that's Larian Studios. I'm using that as a metaphor, which hopefully you understand in the greater scope of a conversation around Baldur's Gate 3. But I think what they've done here is really important and really interesting, with choosing to produce a game that hopefully will become a generational game that lasts for the next 10 years. And it's out there. You could buy it whenever. You never need to worry about battle passes or microtransactions or a cash app or anything else, because it's there. Play it. Enjoy it. Meanwhile, other games still have those things. You can participate or you don't, but it doesn't impact anyone but you. Food for thought. Love to hear your comments. Drop them down below. Hopefully you're enjoying Baldur's Gate 3. And until next time, everybody, stay safe and happy gaming.